Everyone talking about a very common concern in fragrance, which is whether fragrance expires and what you can do to kind of prevent that. People will often go to great lengths to try to make sure it doesn't, whether that means keeping it out of light, making sure it's in as cold of a room as possible. You'll probably see all kinds of stuff like that if you're looking up ways to extend fragrance. But in my experience, this is really, really exaggerated of a concern. I'm happy to report. So when I first started getting into fragrance, I would see that, talked about all the time. If you go on fragrance subreddits, any kind of fragrance site where there's a community or something, especially with like newer people coming into it, but even with people who've been in it for a long time, people will talking about like, does fragrance expire? How many years do I have? How many months? Like, what if I left it in my car for 5 minutes? Maybe not quite like that, but talking about the different things that can happen to it. And first of all, with having started a decant site, having bought so many, hundreds of bottles and going through them and having decanted them and having smelled what the results are and done quality assurance to make sure that they are still good, not a single one that I bought has been bad. And granted, I only buy from completely legitimate, reliable distributors, but some of them were really rare, hard to get, like the last they had in stock, been around for quite a while. So first of all, I can confirm it's definitely not a case where they automatically are just going to go bad within a certain number of years. Another reason I can confirm that is because I have tried quite a few fragrances at this point that are very, very old. And I mean ones literally that were made in the 1800s. Like by Guerlain has a series that they came out with, I think in like 1828. And these are not ones where it's not something like 4711 cologne where it's like it was made in the 1700s and they use the same recipe today. I'm talking about ones where it is the fragrance that was made back then. Really, really expensive to even get like the tiniest sample now. It's the real thing, and it didn't go bad still. So some notes are going to go bad. Some aroma chemicals, ingredients are going to go bad a lot easier than others. But it is so far from a given that, your shelf life is going to be so low, all your bottles are going to go bad in a couple years. And I've really just kind of started to realize that recently because everybody says the opposite, even though it doesn't necessarily happen to them. It's just kind of considered common knowledge or a concern in fragrance. But from my experience, it's just really, really overblown. From that perspective, first of all, just after, hundreds of bottles, many of which were very old, trying fragrances that are literally hundreds of years old, I did an experiment. I live in Los Angeles and in a particularly hot area of Los Angeles where I kept some fragrances that ones I didn't care about as much in the hottest part of the apartment. Not full on like in the windowsill direct sunlight, but like really they were getting hot. Didn't go bad yet, and it's been a while that they've been in that situation. I certainly don't keep my fragrances out of light in general in terms of, I do for the ones that I'm decanting or selling or whatever, more just for storage and keeping them sanitary and clean. But in terms of my full bottle worthy ones, no, nothing's gone bad. In my whole time of fragrance, only one situation has happened ever where a fragrance has been bad. And it was something where I bought it like a partially used bottle or something years ago. And this is the most common situation of certain like citrusy ones, especially sort of like cheap citrusy designery ones. This was like Lacoste Rouge, which I love. I wore that for years. I still wear it and stuff. But ones that are kind of like that, and citrus notes are already really fleeting. Like they tend to disappear pretty quickly after an opening. So they also just don't tend to last as long and they disintegrate more over time. And that one, it just smelled almost like vinegar or something when I opened it. Like it had clearly started to kind of go bad. And yeah, but other than that, including with Lacoste Rouge and other bottles that I've had of it, never had that issue. Not trying to discount anybody who has. If anything, I just mean this as more reassurance. Like, because I definitely had anxiety for a while. Like, oh God, what if something I love is discontinued? And then even if I get backup stock of it or something, it's going to go bad and I'm going to lose this fragrance I love. Or, is it so bad that I'm not storing them in this, like, wine cooler chamber or whatever cellar, like, to keep them at the perfect temperature or anything. But I think it's just really, really not true that they're that at risk of going bad to the extent that a lot of people act like. And I'm happy to report that because I think people just don't need to be as worried as they currently are. That said, no, I would not keep fragrance in your car for sure. No, I wouldn't go out of the way to do things like that where it's going to be in like a really hot enclosed environment. Always better to kind of be on the safe side, but I don't think if it's inconveniencing you that you need to go out of the way to do things that are, keeping them, I don't know, in the fridge or something if you don't want to. Some people do that. It does seem kind of fun to have like a little beauty fridge or whatever they call it where you just keep your fragrance. But yeah, just it does not go bad nearly as often as some people will have you believe. And usually from the people I've talked to who are the most concerned about it, it has not happened to them. Of the ones I've talked to, they just, well, I hear that, I read this, kind of thing. So I'm curious for people who, I guess either way, what your experience is has any fragrance gone bad for you? What was the scenario if it did? Again, not negating it. It does happen for sure, but it just doesn't happen to the extent that a lot of people worry about, that it's such a common thing. It's going to happen to every fragrance you own within, 6 months or whatever. So yeah, curious to know other people's thoughts on this as well.